Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today, we are going to go through 5 takeaways from the Detroit Pistons Media Day, which took place on Monday afternoon. For me, it was Tuesday morning at 2:30 a.m. I'm recording on the same day, so I'm lacking a lot of sleep as I got up to check out and post content about the media day earlier this morning. I went to work. Now I'm back home after dinner at around 9:30 p.m. recording. So we're getting close to being up for 24 hours. But today is an exciting day, and there's plenty to go through. I'm going to highlight the 5 main takeaways for myself. But before we get into those, I'm your host, Jack Kelly. You can follow me over on all social media platforms at Pistons_Jack for all Pistons news and analysis. And if you're feeling so kind, please hit that subscribe button. I think we're at 3.3K subscribers. The channel continues to grow, and the coverage is only going to get bigger and better this season. I can assure you of that. I'm really excited. So stick with me, and yeah, let's get into today's video. So as I mentioned off the top, there's 5 things I want to go through today. Media Day typically is a day for the fans to get excited for it's a chance for us to see new players in the new Pistons jerseys, or in their new threads, I should say. It's a chance for us to see returning players. It's a chance for us to see the rookies. It's an exciting day. It's kind of the unofficial start date to the season, in my opinion. It's where we can start to build some hype. The excitement comes back, and opening night is less than a month away. The Pistons play a preseason game in a week, so plenty happening. The NBA has kind of just, after kind of a long off season, it's already back. And I think whilst today is a day of a lot of positivity, a lot of inspirational one-liners, motivational type things, I think the biggest piece of news today is that Ausar Thompson will not be ready to go for training camp. So Trajan Langdon spoke first, the Pistons general manager or president of basketball operations, at Media Day, and immediately he addressed the fact that Ausar is the only player who won't be right to go for training camp, which I believe begins by the time you're watching this today. Every other player on the roster is ready to go except for Ausar. And I quote from Trajan, "Ausar is going through a medical process with the NBA and the NBA Players Association and won't be ready for training camp." He later said, "Ausar is allowed to do conditioning, strength training, and non-contact drills, but essentially this is a matter that's out of the Pistons' hands." As I mentioned, it's something due to based off what we heard and what I can assume, due to the blood clots and the severity of that type of health scare. That's where the NBA and the Players Association have intervened, and they are doing their own investigation, might be the wrong word, but basically this decision right now is out of the Pistons' hands. They don't have merit to, or Ausar himself. Neither of the Pistons or Ausar can say, from my understanding, that they want to play 5-on-5. It's a decision that has to be made by the Players Association, who of course have Ausar's health in their best interests. So I believe Trajan said this came about a week ago. From everything we know, Ausar has had a relatively it's been a healthy offseason for him, clearly. I think we were told probably around Trajan's hiring or JB's hiring earlier in the offseason that Ausar was back doing full workouts, but maybe that was just non-contact, one-on-one, or not one-on-one, but just, skill type stuff. Maybe we were all led to believe, or we misunderstood the phrasing back then. But my biggest takeaway from this is, one, I hope Ausar is able to go. I don't personally, it's a bummer that he's not. I don't think he'll be out there for preseason, and I don't think he'll be there opening night. I think if he's going to miss the first week of training camp or more, I don't see why he'll be in the preseason games, which would mean I think it's just a slower start to the season for him, which is a huge bummer. But first and foremost, Ausar Thompson's 21 years old. I think his potential is maybe the highest on this team if he does hit his ceiling. I think no matter what, he's a top 3 kind of talent on this roster. And I think if he has to miss the first 20 games, then do it. If it's not for just his basketball ability, for anything to do with your heart and all that kind of stuff, like that stuff's scary. So I don't care how long it takes him to get ready. I think the main thing here is that he's cleared from all doctors, all parties involved to play. And if that takes, like I said, a couple of months, and that's what it takes, it sucks. It's going to hurt the Pistons. He's their best defender. He's, best perimeter defender, most athletic player. Like, he is a crucial piece, I should say, to this team this season and in the future. So hopefully, this can turn around quickly, and maybe he is our opening night, but my gut feel is he will not be there opening night, at least hitting the court. He will, of course, be there on the bench. So I think, unfortunately, that's the biggest takeaway for me. I think that's the biggest takeaway for everyone. And while it's a bit of a downer, or a bit of a not so positive one, I think it's the biggest talking point out of training camp. The next kind of place I wanted to go, number 2, was some comments from JB Bickerstaff around setting standards and holding players accountable. And what I mean by this is, we always get this kind of stuff. Like coaches always talk about setting standards, building a foundation. Like, especially here with the Pistons in the past 4 to 5 years, I feel like we've heard foundations, restorations, anything to do with building from the ground up. We've heard the phrase, and JB highlighted those types of things today. But one of the things that stood out to me was kind of the way he spoke about development. And I'm going to talk about this in a later point as it pertains to Jaden Ivey. But JB said, holding people to a standard matters. Young guys often get to play minutes and make mistakes, and they know that they are going to keep playing, so they don't learn as quickly as they should. And he referred to how that's happened here in Detroit in the past. He said, we're going to hold guys accountable. There's a standard. And what I took from this is that guys aren't just getting gifted minutes anymore. Yes, the younger guys are going to get their time, but if they're not contributing to winning, and they're not, like JB highlighted 2 things in putting in maximum effort and bringing a defensive intensity, if you're not bringing that and you're making mistakes, like, it's going to be hard for you to get on the court consistently, is kind of what I took from that. There's no more like all first round picks get 26 minutes or more, or all, 4 or 5 starters are first and second year guys. Like, I truly think those days are gone. And I think that's a good thing, because I think we saw last season, the previous regime's plan was to hope all their draft picks hit, and that they were going to be like the Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, OKC. Like, I truly think that was kind of what the plan was to an extent. And obviously that completely stuffed up last season. So I think those comments from JB stood out to me, because it's something I wanted to hear, but it's something I'm going to be watching for in the first 10 games of the season, in particular, when maybe the Pistons, they've got a really tough first 7 games. Like, I'm really going to be looking to see if JB holds these young guys accountable and isn't just gifting minutes, because I think that'll be crucial to any success. Like, obviously we don't want to see Jaden Ivey tied to the bench, or another young guy getting 0 minutes, but I'm more than happy if, for example, someone like Jaden comes in and opens a game with 2 turnovers and a bad shot. Like, I'm more than happy for him to go to the bench, regain his composure, and enter the game with a renewed focus. Same for Jalen Duren. If he comes out, defensive intensity isn't there, immediately sub in Isaiah Stewart. That was something that I love to hear as well, was the idea of Isaiah Stewart being used as a 5 as his primary position. Like, hearing JB allude to that, and how they can make Stu more effective around the basket and really harness his offensive rebounding, was something I love to hear, because we all know, like, Stu can play the 4 in stretches, but we don't really want to see Stu playing all these minutes of the 4. So that was just another little thing. But there's some more stuff from JB here, which I'm going to get into. But overall, just with JB, like, we've said this heaps, but having a coach that seems invested, like, hearing him talk about all the the stuff they've done on the research on the players. Like, I know the bar's low, but last year Monty Williams, it felt like, did not do the necessary research and background on the roster he was inheriting, particularly the young guys. And I think we saw that with the rotations he put out last season. So just having a coach that's, from what he's saying, it sounds like he's done all the research, and I know that should be the bare minimum for a head coach, but it's refreshing to hear nonetheless. Like, I want to highlight that. Next was some more comments on Jaden Ivey from JB Bickerstaff. I probably should have had this one second, to be honest, but we've got it coming in here at number 3. And there was these 2 quotes here, because Jaden Ivey, I think his role on the team is probably the biggest question mark for me. Like, and it's not just about starting kind of off the bench. It's a mixture of, like, are they going to play him alongside Cade for bulk minutes? Are they going to put him on ball? Is he going to be off ball? Are they going to try and turn him into more of an off ball player overall? Or are they going to really lean into his on ball stuff? And there's just, for me, a lot of questions about how's Ivy going to be utilized and how's Jaden going to look in year 3, because part of me thinks Jaden could come in this year and average 20 points. Like, I really believe that. I really believe could be far and away the Pistons' second highest scorer. He's just that type of talent, in my opinion. But part of me could also see him struggling once again to open the year with his now 3rd coach in 3 years, trying to adjust to, once again, a new system, a new coaching staff, new teammates. Like, and he's not the only one dealing with this, but him and Jalen Duren in particular have had 3 coaches in 3 years. Like, that's a lot of turnover. So, but JB said about Ivy, when asked, "We believe there is a lot there and he has a high ceiling. It's our job to figure out how to put him in positions to be successful." He later said, on an extension from this, "Let's put guys in positions of strength to be successful, then on the side work on those weaknesses." He spoke about how players can lose their confidence focusing on their weaknesses too much, and it detracts from their overall performance on the court. And so that's a really interesting way to talk about player development that I kind of haven't heard before. I'm sure others have, but I think he was talking about this with Jaden because he felt like, he didn't say Jaden's name directly, but it came up when talking about Jaden, because I think what he was saying is, I think we can forget what Jaden's strengths are, and we need to really focus first and foremost on putting him in positions to succeed and harnessing his strengths so his confidence remains high. Because basically what he was alluding to is that he felt like Jaden's confidence might have been low last year, and that's probably something him and Jaden have spoken about, because Jaden was focusing immensely on maybe trying to improve other parts of his games instead of strengthening and really honing in on, like, his athleticism and finishing. Like, and it felt like at the start of last season, Jaden's finishing was good, but, like, overall the percentages were down for him, and it was a down year. And maybe last year he got not too ahead of himself. That's the wrong thing, but was so focused on trying to improve those weaknesses that the previous strengths he had, like his pull-up midi as a rookie, just completely dropped away. So I thought that was good to hear. I don't think that really provides much insight on who's starting, who's not, but I think I'm really going to be keen to see how Jaden Ivey's utilized, because Trajan also mentioned, when asked about Ivey, he's also intrigued to see how Bickerstaff uses him, but there has been discussions about playing him alongside Cade. How does he look not alongside Cade? Like, they're having all these discussions, Pistons fans like you and I are having. So not that should be too much of a surprise, but I think just Jaden's role on this team is going to be super interesting. And, you know, with Ausar now potentially out for the first preseason game, like, Jaden Ivey, his role, how he looks is probably the number one thing I'll be looking for in the preseason, to be honest. So moving on now to some comments from Cade. We can't, Cade Cunningham, he's a franchise. Got to talk about him. His comments always hold more weight. And there's just a couple here, which I'm not going to spend too much time on, but I know everyone loves these kind of quotes. And he kind of said, Cade spoke about, there's 2 things. The first thing that stood out to me was just how emphatic he was about the extension he signed with Detroit. Now, of course, he was never going to leave. It would be an absolute shock if he was to leave with how much money the Pistons could offer him on this extension. But Cade said, before even signing the deal, He already knew he wanted to stay in Detroit. He's here. He's not going anywhere. He's really emphatic with that. Like, I thought that was kind of nice to hear as a fan, because honestly, there were times last year throughout that losing streak where, whilst it like might have been a low percentage, there was some really low points where I thought, does this guy want to stay here? Because his brand, like Cade Cunningham, you have to remember, like, when the Pistons won that draft lottery, like, that draft class was meant to be one of the best, at least from my memory. Like, the 2021 draft class was a huge draft class, and the fact that Pistons won that was a massive deal. And Cade Cunningham was a huge deal coming out of Oklahoma State. Like, him coming to Detroit was a massive thing, and it feels like the shine's worn off that because of how bad the Pistons have been. And of course, Cade is part of that, but his brand as well has taken a huge hit. Like, he's the number one pick. He gets left out of all conversations. Like, you'll see the past 4 number one draft picks. Who would you take out? It'll be like Wemby and Paolo. And then Cade gets left off all those lists. Like, he just does. And that's because of his team success. I don't think it's because of his talent. But, I say all that to say, like, there was times last season where I thought I actually would not be surprised anymore if he asked for a trade. Like, I know it doesn't make financial sense, but just with how bad this team's been, how bad it's been, the organization at times has been ran just from a basketball operations point of view. Like, this is the number one pick. This is a guy who wants to be a perennial all-star, like, in the right situation, could be a superstar. Like, he is the face of a team, but I could see him requesting a trade. But just to hear him answer those questions, be so emphatic on saying kind of declaring his commitment to Detroit, I thought was cool. Obviously, that can change now that he's signed a deal. He can still request a trade, but I thought it was cool to hear. The other thing he spoke about was talking about how he wants to be the head of the snake and the guy to lead the Pistons back to the playoffs. He spoke about how he's in the building or at the ballpark for when the Tigers clinched their playoff berth the other night, and how special that was to the fans and how they gather around the team. Spoke about the Lions, and he basically just said he wants to bring that to Detroit. And I think, whilst from what I've come to understand as Australian, the Pistons are kind of the 4th team in Detroit. Like, I've been told it goes hockey 1, Lions 2, baseball 3, Pistons 4. But no matter what, I just think Detroit sports fans are crazy, like, in the best way possible. I really mean that. I haven't been there. Can't wait to get there. But, I spoke about the attendance numbers last season. The Pistons finished like 15th in average attendance last season. Now, some of that's because they have a bigger arena, but I don't really care about capacity percentages and stuff. When your team wins 14 games and you finish in the middle of the pack for attendance, like, I think Pistons fans are crazy and are so committed that, if you're Cade Cunningham and you can just get that team back to the play-in, like, that building's going to be packed every night. Like, I really believe that, and I'm hoping to get there this season, and I'm hoping this is the season we get to experience some of that success. So those are just some comments from Cade. He did talk about working on his floater and stuff around the ring. Shout out to Kuka Hill for asking that question from Locked On Pistons. Final thing I wanted to talk about that stood out to me was how the veterans that the Pistons have added this season were spoken about. Now, I got 2 quotes here, one from Marcus Sasser and one from Ausar Thompson, 2 players who were rookies last season and have only experienced one batch of kind of veterans in their time. So they've now got a whole new set of veterans this season. And when I'm talking about the vets, I'm pretty much just talking about Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Malik Beasley. And I guess Fontecchio as well, who came later in the season last year. But Sasser said, we had good vets last year, but I feel a different vibe from the vets this season. They seem more into it, not even just on the court. They're helping us with life. So that statement there, that quote there is not, I don't need to add anything else. Like, he's not necessarily saying last year's vets weren't it, but he's kind of saying they weren't really in it. They weren't really committed, and maybe that was because of injuries and that kind of thing. But it feels like there's a different vibe. It feels like there's some real leadership now in this locker room. And Tobias Harris, I'm going to have to talk about him in another video, but I think it's really cool to have him back and have a guy like just listen to the way that man speaks. Go watch his press conference. Like he's a leader, and I don't care what you say about his kind of on-court performance. Like I think his leadership's going to help this team a heap. But back to that quote, like, yeah, that says it all to me. They're helping us with life. They're not just helping on the court. Their vibe's great. Like, yeah, you love to hear it. And then Ausar, he was talking about the veterans as well. He said, the wing room, I learn from them every day. I work with Tobias, Fontecchio, Tim Hardaway, sometimes Ron Holland. They're great vets. Obviously not Ron, but Tobias will always say, AT, come shoot with me. That's something we didn't have last year. So just more of that guidance. Like, it's a little thing, but I think it showed last year that as soon as that losing streak started, there was no leadership. And that, like, not only was there no leadership on court, I don't think there's any leadership from the head coach. And, you know, I spoke about it all last season. Like, I felt like the leadership from the front office, and it just felt confusing. Felt like no one was in charge. So to just hear these little things, to have like Trajan, who's just very well spoken, very measured in his approach and calm, to have a guy like JB who seems like a real motivator, someone who's, you know, been around the block. His dad was a head coach. Just to have these leadership pillars, like in the front office, in the coaching staff, and now on the court, I think is huge, because I spoke about all three of those pillars and the lack of leadership in them last season, and how that if they could just fix like one or two of those would be huge for me. But I feel like, you know, not all of this will necessarily translate to wins, but I feel like the leadership has been revamped and is looking very promising from what we've heard and seen so far in all three facets. And I think that's huge, because I think as a basketball fan and as someone who's paid a lot more attention to the NBA in the past 4 to 5 years and watching this Pistons rebuild in particular, I think those intangibles, I used to not really believe in them as much. I used to just think it was like kind of jargon that gets thrown out to make fans feel better about their team. But after witnessing what we've witnessed the past 2 years, I now put so much more investment in leadership and these types of quotes we've read out today. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. That's kind of all the main takeaways I had. Gone a bit longer than I would have liked with this, but the Pistons got every press conference on their YouTube channel. Go watch them all there. I've got a heap of stuff on my Twitter page. I got some stuff on Instagram if you want to go have a quick scan. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's show. I'll be back tomorrow pumping out more player previews as we count down to the first preseason game on Sunday or Monday for my friends in Australia. But if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Please support the channel and any of my social media pages. I appreciate all the love, all the support. And as always, before we get out of here, go Pistons.